those of you online, you've missed a lot of good talk about spiders. But it's all good. It's all safe because you're online. And hopefully there are no spiders where you are. But it is good to see everybody tonight. We've got a couple online with us that might pop up to a few more. Really quick, let's turn to Luke 15 just to kind of make a point before I start anything. Luke chapter 15. Ruth Leach says, good evening. Can everybody say hi to Ruth?
Hi, Ruth.
Ruth's watching, and Ruth and another mystery person. We don't know who it is. So sometimes, yeah, if you're watching online, log in. It's always good for us to know who's with us. Luke 15. See if you can do this now that I've located the right Bible. So but if we look at Luke 15 right away, it says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, this man welcomes sinners and he eats with them. So they're getting mad at Jesus for doing what? Doing the very thing we've been talking about for the last few weeks as we kind of close out our bridge stories. Jesus is building a bridge. He always does, doesn't he? From himself to those that need to hear it. And some people weren't all that excited about the bridge building. Then he goes on to tell 3 different parables. What's a parable?
Story. Well, yeah.
Okay. I'm in Luke 15. Yeah, Luke 15. Parables are often just small stories. Parables sometimes will teach an abstract concept with something simple. For example, the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. Kingdom of God is very abstract. You can kind of, but the mustard seed, especially in their culture, was something that they were familiar with. Jesus told a story. Actually, he tells 3 different parables or stories in Luke 15. What did Jesus say about the shepherd with 99 sheep, with 100 sheep, and one gets lost? Does anybody remember that story? He would leave the 99 to go looking for the one. Okay. Then Jesus told a story. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Then Jesus told a story about a woman who has 10 silver coins. What did she do? Do you remember that story?
Yeah, lost coin,
yeah. What happened?
She called all her neighbors and everything in.
Yeah, she lights a lamp, tears the house apart, finds it, then calls and tells all her friends. And if that wasn't enough, once upon a time, a man had 2 sons. Who could nutshell the rest of the story for me?
Oh, that's a good one, too.
I don't even have to tell it to you. What happens next?
One goes away.
One of them goes away. Which one?
The youngest one.
Younger one. What
And he
happens?
spends all the money that his father gave him, and then he gets broke and has to come back home wagging
Okay.
his tail.
Okay. Spends all his money, comes home wagging his tail, as Sharon would say. So he
His dad accepted him just like he did.
and his dad accepted him, and they all lived happily ever after?
Sort of.
No. The older son's jealous, bent out of shape. I just kind of gave a hint of a story, and for those of you online, you may not have been able to hear it. And people were actually it was happening. We were all talking over one another because everybody knows a good what? Story. In Jesus' case, it was a parable. Why do you think Jesus taught parables? Simple to understand. You can remember it, repeat it. Meaning doesn't change. Earthly stories with heavenly meanings. You know, they tell us in public speaking school. I never really went to one, but they tell us in public speaking literature or instructions. I never really went to a school where I read a lot of articles. If you listen to my message last Sunday, you probably remember 10% of it. Anytime you listen to a message, the retention rate is about 10%. If I would have told a story, the retention rate goes from 10 up to about 50 to 60%. Most people will remember a story, but the 3 points on how to find, the kingdom of God, they may not remember those unless they all start with the same letter, right? Or they spell out an acronym. The best way to remember something is if you guys preached every Sunday. I should remember because I preached it about 80 to 90% of what I did on Sunday. I doubt I could do that. I could probably get close to it. Yeah, if you actually did the speaking, if you actually did the preparation, if you listen to a Bible study, if you take notes, it's about 30 to 40%. If you tell a story, it's about 50 to 60%. But if you're just listening, retention rate for an average listener is like 10%. That's why if you heard a lecture at school, without your notes, you're not going to remember much of it. But if you watched your favorite episode on TV, you're going to remember what? Maybe not 100% of it, but you're going to remember 60% of it. You're not going to tell all your friends what you learned at school yesterday because you don't remember any of it. But you'll tell all your friends what you watched on TV last night, right?
Actually, no, I don't.
Because we remember most of it. Some of us. Sharon's like, I don't remember. That's okay. And Trenda says the older you get, the percentages go down.
I just thought that was my answer.
Simply put, there's nothing like a good story. If you remember just 10% of what we learned last week, maybe you might remember we talked a lot about being afraid. We talked about how fear can keep us from building bridges from us to the people that are lost. What were some things that we were afraid of last week that we can remember?
Rejection.
We're afraid of rejection. Okay, what else?
Being obsolete.
What? Being obsolete. I fear that I have nothing.
Yes.
I think we put it, Bruce, we're the 8 tracks, and they're in, I guess, virtual reality world. I don't know what kids are doing these days. I think we were also, when we were brutally honest, we were just kind of saying, sometimes we're just afraid of the culture itself. Right? When we see the news and they don't understand us and we don't understand them and they might reject us, or there's a lot of fear to go with that. And we talked about, if you remember, maybe if we can get up, we talked about the story of Caesarea Philippi. What was the famous line from that story? I didn't do a good job. There's not much. Caesarea Philippi. Yeah, would you say?
What must I do to be saved?
Yeah, what must I do to be saved? He took them on top of the rock and the cliff, remember? And down the... Who do these people say I am? And Peter said, I don't know what they say, but I say you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And then Jesus says, you are right. And then what did he say next? What was his famous... And on this rock, I will build my church in places like this and in scary places. And what will not happen? The gates of hell. And what's interesting is historians say that's actually what they were looking down on. The hill there was called the gates of hell. And so the gates of hell. So we kind of said, don't be afraid, because Jesus calls us to build. There's probably one person that said, Fairview Heights, I don't know about that, and maybe they were afraid. Or maybe somebody said, I don't know if you can build a church on Buncombe Road. Well, sure enough, on this rock, was anybody here in the days they built the church in 1987? You lived in the neighborhood. You saw it go up. And
My
Okay. So Jim was here. Okay, yeah. You remember? Laura was here. Betty was here. You can remember. Maybe people said, I don't know if you can build a church. Well, here it is. And maybe there's a lot of fear in building a church. Do we have enough money? Do we have enough? And God provides. So as we build bridges, sometimes there are ways we can get over our fear. And so the big theological reason is we can get over our fear of reaching the community because we know that God is with us. God has ordained that a church will be built in places all over the world. And God says that evil things will not overcome the church. Let's take a step back for a minute. Is there ever a time that you overcame a fear? What did you do? Yeah, Beulah.
Well, as some folks know, it was a long time in between when I went to church as a young person and when I started coming here. And there's a fear of walking through the door by yourself.
Okay.
But someone invited me to come with them, and I did. And there's safety in numbers.
Okay.
So I came. They don't come here anymore, but I'm still here. So
Okay.
it's
It held on you.
well, I would not have come by myself to a church that I was unfamiliar with.
Okay.
But
And
coming in a group made it easier.
and having a relationship made that easier to overcome. That might be a good lesson for us in reaching any kind of people, isn't it? It's hard to go somewhere where you don't know people, when you're on your own without connections. What else? It can be a fear of anything. What's a way you overcame a fear?
Well, I don't know that I've completely overcome it, but storms with lightning and
Okay.
a lot of wind. So when that happens, I stand out on the back porch.
So is that probably the best thing to do when there is a storm? I'm just making fun.
Last week,
So
we spent all day in the basement.
So you will just, how does that overcome your fear of storms? Just stand outside.
I don't think I'm as fearful of them anymore.
I know why. That is because of.
Okay. It's how you face the fear was to go stand outside. Okay.
Now, I'm still afraid of flying. That I'm not.
You've never been in an airplane?
Yeah, me.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Anybody else? How do you overcome a fear? Ellen.
I was a little girl. I was afraid of thunder, as a lot of children are. And I'm still, storms I still don't like. But when I was little, and I would be so upset. And of course, thunder always came in the night and everything. But my mother, we were in the living room, and I was so scared, and I was crying, and she said stop, and she knelt with me, and she asked Jesus to make me not afraid.
Okay.
And I felt the fear lift
Okay.
because of her prayer for me. And so God had intervened in it. Like I said, I'm still afraid of, as an adult, I know the stuff I should be afraid of with a storm. But as a child, it was just the noise,
Okay.
And after
So when you're scared of a storm, just having mom there praying for you, praying over you. Well, Richard Lewis gives a couple of things, a couple of steps on overcoming a fear. And really what we saw was just kind of, it wasn't, you didn't have to check out a library book and dissect, 20 different things. It was just finding something simple. I'll just step outside. I just knowing somebody's praying for me. I'll just find somebody that I know. So, a lot of ways, the best way to get over your fear is to face it. And there are two things that we can do to face our fear of the unknown. And one we've already talked about tonight. One is, a lot of times that we're afraid of building a bridge to the community because, I'm irrelevant. I don't have anything to say. I don't remember if I could tell somebody about Jesus, I might mess it up. Richard Lewis says, one way that you can overcome a fear of reaching out to the community is realizing that you have a story. And that's great because stories are fun to tell. Like I was just with Dale and Trenda tonight, and they were telling me story after story of, one story for different countries. We had a lot of fun just kind of reminiscing, and I'm just amazed at the different things that they've experienced in different cultures and different places. But that's just it. Stories transcend age. They transcend culture. Everybody loves a good story. Before the pandemic hit, there was one industry that always would do well, and they just made more and more money every summer that went by, even if the stories weren't any good. What industry am I talking about? We're very slowly getting, the movie industry. I can remember in 2008 when the last big economic thing hit, everything was down except for one thing. It was the movie business, because everybody loves a good story. And even though that the pandemic hit, movie theaters went down, but guess what stock went up? Rhymes with Jetflix. Right? We couldn't go out, so people would and now you can find any streaming service you want to watch anything you want. I mean, people flock to stories. I remember we were doing ministry one time. Here's a story of mine, and we were talking to somebody, I think it was in college, and she says, well, I'll be glad to talk to you, but I got to get back from my stories. And we just kind of looked at each other like, what in the world is she talking about? You know what she was talking about? Her soap operas.
Oh, Lord.
Everybody loves a good story. And you have one. You have a story. And have you ever heard the saying, everybody's story would probably become a bestseller? Have you heard that before? I think it's true. I really think it's true. Your story could probably become a bestseller because everybody is just interested in stories. Why do you think a story is so powerful when you're wanting to reach people outside the church?
I think it's because it's continuous. I think once you get that thought going, it sticks with you, and you keep continuing to
Okay.
go off of that. Yeah.
Sharon says you can build off of a story and it continues and people are interested. Okay.
They're interested, yeah.
Why else is a story so powerful? Because suddenly, this culture out there that we're so afraid of, a story can do what?
Bring them to you.
Bring us together. And we can find common ground. Isn't that why Jesus was great at telling stories? Because it reached across to so many people. And just think about the different types of stories that you could tell. Hopefully, one of the most important stories you could tell, how did you come to know Christ? Why did you accept Him into your life? Where were you and who told you about that? That in of itself is a story. And if you're like, well, man, I don't, sometimes it's like, I don't know if I can. Yeah, but can you just tell your story? Chances are that's what, a story is also build what? Relationships. I thought it was interesting, the first thing I asked, what overcame a fear? When I know somebody. When you tell someone your story, they know you a little better. And probably you know them a little better. Because I like what Sharon said, no story just kind of goes out there in isolation. You tell a story, then I'm going to tell a story. And someone else will tell, and we see how all these stories come together. And think about the stories that you could tell, how you became Christ. What's something tough that you had to get through? Maybe a story of loss, maybe a story of anxiety, maybe a story of, just troubled, overwhelmed, and how did you get through it? How did God help you? That's a story. What's something that really excites you? What's something that brings you great joy? That's probably a story. What do you do? What brought you out of the last time you were really stressed and overwhelmed? That's a story. How did you keep your sanity during the pandemic? That's a what?
Blessing.
Story. Blessing. Yeah. And we could, You know, and so a lot of your times, well, I don't feel that I have the credentials. I don't feel that I'm, you know, I tell you what, I don't care how tech savvy you are. You bring somebody into a group of students, right? I don't care what age you are. If you can tell a good story, you have their attention. So you might think, well, I'm too old-fashioned. I don't translate. Well, if you have a story and you can tell that story, you find that the world will listen. And what's really interesting is, I'm not saying this is good or bad, but in our over-information world, this is kind of where we started with the bridge building. If I came to you and said, I have information about Christ, one of the things we talked about is, well, I need to see that information in action. People don't trust information anymore. I'm not saying that's good or bad. In some ways I think it's bad. I'm just saying it's kind of the way it is. But it's interesting how the power of a story can influence people. Isn't that why we want to be really careful of what our kids watch and what they listen to? Because stories are what? They stick with you. They're very influential. Yeah.
You know, that just brought to mind something, and this really shows how bad the media can be. In England, when the king or the queen's husband just passed away, and I got really into that because not that I cared about that.
Sure. Was it
Huh?
Philip? King Philip? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, the newspaper after that had a heyday. In fact, 4 days later, they had her in the hospital on her deathbed. She was never in the hospital.
Yeah, it's
3
just
days
people
after
are.
that, they said that she died, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
and they don't have to be responsible for anything they put in the papers, anything they put on any kind of media, and that is really sad because you know, in the and now too actually, most people get their information through that sort of media.
Yeah. Sharon said it's interesting with the media, there's all sorts of stories that are out there. Her example, if you couldn't hear, was when King Philip died. The follow-up was like different stories about the queen, and not all of them were true, but it brought this to mind. People are looking for a story that's true.
True, and they can really honestly sink their teeth into it.
Let me put a different word to it. They're looking for a story that's real. And, you know, some of us have some wonderful, real stories that can be passed down, that could teach, and you'd be amazed who wants to hear them and who needs to hear them. So one of the things I want us maybe to think about is, and maybe we can just celebrate this on some Wednesday nights, is what is your story? How do you tell your story? How do you continue that story to lead to Christ's story? And everybody has a story that can build a bridge to somewhere else. Here's another way to kind of reduce fears. Number one is use stories. And number two, realize that we need to make the concept of ministry larger than what it is. When I say the word ministry, what do you think of? Services in a church. Preaching out, reaching out, telling others about Christ. What kind of ministries do we have at a church? What kind of ministries do you have at a church? Music, youth, children, senior adults, Bible study. Is that all the ministries that a church could have? Blanket ministry. And by the way, nothing wrong with you. I'm a youth minister in my history. Nothing wrong with children's ministry. Nothing wrong with senior adult ministry. But it's interesting a lot of times how we kind of narrow. Here are the ministries for a church. And Robert Lewis says, if you want to build bridges and people are afraid, I can't, here's a little story. I'll just kind of read you what he says. He goes, in the light and symbol of the cross planted in a real world of dire need, the concept of ministry should expand. It should be inevitable. With the comfortable borders of the church exploding, the limits for the work of the church are practically endless. The tidy definitions of ministry in an isolated church building, teaching Sunday school, ushering, serving on a community, become inadequate. What matters now is simple good works that display the love of Christ. Robert Lewis's words, not mine. He says, the truth is finally revealed. Anything done in the name of Christ, in the name of love, is ministry. Anything. Of course, the more it touches real needs and vital areas, the more influential it will be. But nowhere does the Bible qualify good works, and neither should we. Instead, we should celebrate the infinite ways that people can go in Christ's name. We must broaden and enrich the concept of personal ministry. We must bless and affirm and be willing to release our people into areas that they may not normally call ministry. Now, I think we got to take the word anything with common sense, of course. You know, when you say anything, anything can be done in ministry, you can raise your hand. Obviously not things that are sinful or evil, okay? And I think he's assuming that we all know that. I'll clarify that just in case. But I think the point he's trying to make here is, let's expand what ministry can be. He says, I can remember having early morning breakfast with an advertising executive. He was fairly new at Fellowship Baptist Church, which was their church, and spoke of his frustration. He's like, I'm just not a churchy kind of guy, he said. I can give money. I really don't want to usher. I'm too scared to teach, and I'm not that good at it. And I said, well, it sounds like you've exhausted all of your options. I said, so what do you want to do? He says, well, what I'm doing right now, I contract and I produce high-quality advertising. And I said, have you ever thought of doing that for the church? You're kidding me, he said. He said, no, I'm not. What if you help us speak to the community with 30-second sermons? 2 years and several TV commercials later, not only had this ministry made an impact on our community, one commercial actually made front page headlines, I'm assuming in a good way, but our church actually won an advertising award for its effort. It says, for too long, sometimes the church tries to turn people into something they're not, and it only increases the fear of inadequacy. How much better to go with the grain and transform who they are into ministry. Maybe people have passion for schools, politics, sports, the elderly, city development, moral issues, advertising. Any of these can be potential areas of ministry. The fear, when you find that people can find any different ways to be a minister, you find them saying words like, you're kidding. And then excitement and possibility increases rather than fear. So does that make sense? So I think the point is, what are simple, I'm going to scoot up this way. There are lots of ways you can be a minister, because I think that gentleman probably describes a lot of people. Now, ushering is not too hard. I'll contest with him there. But a lot of people don't feel comfortable teaching. A lot of people don't feel comfortable even praying out loud in church. And so some people might ask, well, what is there for me to do to reach the community? I can't teach. I can't. Well, what is it that you can do? What is it that you enjoy to do? And can you do it in the name of Christ? I'm sorry, Trenda. Yeah.
That just reminded me, when we were in Aradia, and I told you they took us to their home to eat, they had a Bible college at the church, and students came to the meal also. And one of the girls talked to me on the side, and she said, what is your ministry? And of course I told her what the church did, all these things, and she said, no, what is your ministry? And that's what she was talking about, was personal ministry. Her personal ministry, of course, this is in Romania, and she was from the Moldive area, and her personal ministry was to go and sit on a street and minister to the street children that were there. They would sing songs, and she did little games with them and things like that. So, yeah, it's personal. Your personal
Yeah. So Trenda told a story about just being in Romania, and people asked her, what's your ministry? And she didn't necessarily mean church program ministry. She meant it was just something that you do that helps people. And I think that is kind of our demonstration. Whenever you do something personally that helps other people, that can be in the name of the church. You know, we kind of put limits on what church ministry can be like. And there's you can make quilts. If you like embroidering and making that can be a ministry. What are some other skills that you have? Let's talk about some skills that we have just in this room that can be a ministry that maybe you've never thought of before.
Alan sings,
Okay?
Charlene and Ray play.
Music, okay. That's a typical. What are some other ones that may be outside the box a little bit? Other things that we enjoy.
I think their background is teachers,
Okay? Teaching.
teaching in class.
Yeah.
Marcy likes landscaping.
Landscaping. How could landscaping be a ministry?
Well, it makes, and Marcy's not the only one. I mean, when Judy and her husband were here, he kind of took over the landscaping for a while before they left. But I mean, it makes the front of the church look nicer and more appealing to people. Maybe they would be more welcoming to
Yeah.
come in, make it look like a more pleasing place to visit, you know. And
It can be done here for church. Landscaping can be done just about anywhere. I know a lot of mission trips that we go on. It's like the best way you can, I know especially with the Native American communities, the best way you could reach people is just go and say, we did a lot of house painting. But you could do landscaping. You could do, there's a lot of places that, plant a few flowers. You could deliver flowers in the neighborhood if you wanted to. Yeah.
I think of Jim Marks. He doesn't know how much his ministry is appreciated. He just kind of keeps us going. We don't even think about things.
Okay. Yeah, Jim is the guy that you can call and say, hey, well, this is not working. And he can probably come over or tell you on the phone. Or and Jim, that's a ministry. Again, that can be taken outside the church. I think I told the story here one time about a bunch of guys that didn't know. We don't like to sing. We don't like to do this. I think the pastor said, what do you like to do? We like to work on cars. He's like, can you give us 2 Saturdays a year where if we had single moms drive their car up and you could do simple oil changes or something for free? They're like, sure. And they loved it. And they said it instantly became one of the biggest ministries the church ever had. And it wasn't always single moms that came to the church. They kind of advertised it to the community. And 2 guys found 2 other guys that were buddies of theirs. Hey, we're going to go work on, okay, let's go. And it became a ministry. And yeah.
Bruce and I did some, we delivered bags and things to one of the neighborhoods, several neighborhoods down the street. And as we walked around through that neighborhood, I said, if we had people that could do this, so many of the homes needed to be, things needed to be trimmed up. Things needed, we were talking about landscaping, things needed to be cleaned
Yeah.
up and leaves just drug out and put in bags. I mean, there's all kinds of.
Yeah, we could go to different parks in the area and say, hey, we'd be glad to plant flowers, help things. Doesn't cost you anything, yeah.
Well, and some of the cemeteries,
Bible studies at the nursing homes, but we used to, at camps, we would take kids and we would have them just go in a room and sit and read to someone.
Just take kids to go read to senior adults in nursing homes. Oh, yeah.
One of the things that was interesting when we were doing the Bible studies in nursing homes, that we would have, Charlene went with me a couple of times, and another gal played the piano. We let them sing, and we would let them, now what do you want to sing? And every other song did the same thing, but they didn't really realize that or whatever, but it was just, they loved to sing about Jesus.
Yeah. They love to see kids. I know Denise, this was a pre-pandemic world, but hopefully this world can come back again. In her classrooms, Denise would take any volunteers she could get. It was kind of the opposite. There are a lot of kids in schools that just need somebody to read to or read with them. And she goes, man, grandparents are our best volunteers because they can come in and read. They love being around kids. And so Denise had also, I think my mom and dad went in and helped out. So there's a lot of different, you could do that as a ministry. Think of the schools that are real close to us. Again, that was pre-pandemic. Maybe that world will come back to us. But, you know, it was a kind of the flip of it. It's not just kids reading to adults. I mean, kids, but adults reading to and for kids. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that, whether it's landscaping, watching sports. I've known guys that have had if you like to read, they did Christian book clubs. I think my wife did one of those not too long ago. You know, music clubs. People get together and listen to music. And everybody likes music, and as they invite the community to come in and hear different types of, especially people that don't know Christian music, you can listen to some stuff and say, hey, listen to this. We did that a lot in college, and it was interesting. That was the way I'd minister to my brother a lot, is I'd always put like a different CD or something. He's like, hey, I really like this. It's like, yeah. So there's always different, you know, just a lot of different. And how does that make ministry not so scary all of a sudden?
You're doing something you're comfortable with, and you feel like you're helping people. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. It's not so intimidating to do something that you love to do.
It gives you more of a blessing than it does them.
Yeah. And you can use it. And that's where it gets really fun, because there's probably something each one of you can do in here that nobody else in here can do. and to use that and to be. Can you guys think of any others? Sharon, you were saying something earlier. I'm sorry. What were you saying about something you thought of?
I said, like a Tennessee paper, I still get, you know, that from her family. They a lot of times got big things in there about cemetery. They want people to come help it, because they say.
So with landscaping and keeping things up, serving in a cemetery.
They have a big drive, and of course with that they serve a big breakfast to the people and everything. You know, I mean, they make it like a whole day deal, and they really get reactions on it that way. And like I say, up here, you can go by, and some of these cemeteries are in sad shape.
Yeah.
Real sad.
I remember some Boy Scouts did that in our area. It was a Boy Scout, not a church, but they just went, I think it was for Memorial Day. In the military cemetery, they put flowers and flags, and families were just like, thank you, this is awesome. Because we were just talking today, like some families don't live where their cemeteries or families are buried, and to know that somebody's there taking care of it is.
One of the reasons why they started doing it this way in Tennessee down there, where Herb's family's all from.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those people are gone, and the only ones that are there are the ones that are buried in the ground. And so, you know, a lot of the old timers will still remember them people, though. So they're always willing to jump in.
Yeah. So that's just something for you to think about tonight. Nothing real complicated or anything. But it was just, we kind of talked, I kind of broke the lesson into two parts. If you're really afraid about, well, how can I reach to the community? Think of it in two ways. What's a story that I can tell? And what's something that I can do for ministry? And then talk to us as a staff. So, man, I'd like to try this. I'd like to do that. I'd like to, you know, and I think that's great for me, because I can say, well, let's go and do it, because I can't plan. It's something I don't have to plan. It's like, I already thought of it. Go in the name. Yeah, and so, and just kind of finding those ways for yourself. And those of you that were intrigued by the nursing home, I know, with Shirley Simmons, I got to get a hold of them tomorrow. They've been wanting me to go out there, and just me would be pretty boring. But if we had a team of people that say, hey, we can come sing, we can come read, or we could, there's an outlet out there that we could take advantage of already. And thinking about blankets and things we can make. I know I spoke just last Sunday. You know, we're on about to be our third missionary group. You could make blankets and send them all to DR, and I'm sure Ryan and Kayla and our friends from, there are all sorts of places that those can be used. Yeah, Charlene?
Kyle isn't interested in coming to church, but he really likes helping Margie, going over and doing things that she might have for him.
Yeah.
And our next door neighbor also used to be our next door neighbor, called and wanted him to come help move some boxes. He likes to do things like that.
Kyle's just a servant. Yeah, he likes to come. Yeah, I think I told that story here before too. We started helping a homeless. We did a homeless breakfast every Saturday, and we found friends that were coming to that that we'd never get into a church. Oh, they won't come. They just didn't want to come to church. But when they heard we were serving the homeless, we had friends that would come. Okay, So you never know. Yeah, I thought that was interesting you put that. Sometimes it's tough to get someone to come to church, but if someone needs help, I'll go do it. I'll go help. Yeah. People love to help. Yeah, and church is all about helping people, right? So that's why I said I realize, missions is kind of turning into the new outreach in some ways. If the church is serving the community, you'll find a lot of lost people that are like, hey, I'll help you, because it's just something that they feel comfortable doing. And so that's kind of all I had tonight. And so maybe in future Wednesdays we can keep telling stories and I like that Wednesday night we did that. We had everybody tell their different story and things like that. And think of some ways we can tell these stories outside of where we are, because your stories are valuable and they're precious and they make a difference. And like we said, just from the very beginning, when we started talking about the stories of Jesus, they make an impact. You remember them. They stay with you. So that's what I have tonight. Those of you online, go and tell your story and go and find a simple way that you can minister. And a lot of things are ministry more than what we realize. A lot of people kind of in and out tonight. Janet Pachenko is on. Hi, Janet. Sybil is late, but she's here. Hi, Sybil, if you're here. Ruth says she loves all of you guys. Denise is here, praying for the Purnells and Sybil's family tonight. Cynthia Nikoloff is here. Hi, Cyn. It's good to hear from you. So a lot of people, Sybil just waved at us. So they're listening to us. So as you guys, just before we log off, if there's any kind of prayer requests you need to leave, we're about to jump into our prayer time. So go ahead and leave those really quick. And I'll wait for Bruce to kind of tune us